kind of like going to the software development of the business, can you share with us a little bit more about like how Palantir built its software platform from not only defense, but also the commercial, for example, Gotham, Foundry, AIP, and the evolution of your products along the way?
And this, I think what differentiates us from other companies is that we're very customer led. So I think what we found when we went into a lot of the customers, and I've heard this a lot, and especially in the early days, is like no one actually, the people built what they want and then tried to fit it into the box of whatever the customer was asking for. But what we did was actually we did boots on the ground in the private sector with the government customers, and we understood the needs of the actual customer. We built for them. So people are often surprised. There's lots of issues with Palantir. If you talk to someone who works at Palantir, the one thing they'll never say is that the products don't work. We have no sales team or a medium sales team. We have, a very little marketing team. We barely have, a people department. We have excellent products that work. And the reason those products are excellent is because we listen to the end users. And a lot of the time, and that's because one, that was our philosophy from going in day one. And two, we were encountered so many places that were like, don't talk to me. I don't want another stuff. Because, right now we're in the AI era where everything is exciting about AI. When I started, it was big data. So big data was a thing. And every, CEO or COO went to a conference, heard about big data, came back, emailed someone on their, executive committee and said, I want to talk about big data with someone to make sure we're doing it. And so a lot of our meetings were, okay, we don't really understand what big data is. Can you tell us? And so how do you convert that from, okay, you're just, trying to check a box to the information you're currently sitting on is extremely valuable for your organization to make it more efficient, operate better, create more transparency, check one of the boxes that every company or organization wants to accomplish. How do you do that? And how can we make it useful? And you have to do that on the back of them having very negative experiences for the most part with legacy software companies. So, I remember one of our first meetings with Airbus, they showed us a slide. Airbus was one of our biggest customers. They showed us a slide and they said, these are all of the big data projects we have going on. We have 36 big data pilots currently going on. And they showed us the logos of all the pilots. They said, we don't need another one. We don't need another big data project. Basically, we don't really know what you're going to do for us or how you're here. What we did was, in a matter of weeks, we had an operational tool on the shop floor that was built alongside the people who were actually going to use it. And we were able to come back to our next meeting and say, okay, you have a lot of big data projects. That's fine. We were able to demonstrate that we can reduce delays in the production line of the A350, which at the time was their, best-selling plane. And look, you already have like 50 people who are using it who are not technically trained previously. So we had kind of like a show, don't tell model because we weren't very good at the telling. So we had no choice.
Yes. So moving on now to the present and future of Palantir, right? So very recently, great news. Palantir was added to the S&P not too many weeks ago. And you've talked about network effects, how important they are. The difficulty of getting the first big client then is eased with every big client that you get. And now you're in the S&P 500. And it was a momentous occasion. And Alex Karp said the rebels won. Okay, so what is the next logical step for Palantir now that you are in such an important position, now that you have these network effects? At the end of the day, you've already worked with these huge clients. Is there anything better than that?
Well, I mean, just on the S&P, I think, it was a really big deal for us because I think Karp, when he said the rebels won, was absolutely right. And it really felt that way too, especially because if you look around, Palantir has never been shy, and Karp has never been shy about, we actually say what we believe and we're not afraid to say it. So, he was the first Western CEO of a public company at a time to go to Ukraine. We were like one of the first companies, along with a handful, to express our support for Israel, which was not a business decision. Certainly not. And I think, especially at the time when people were afraid to say anything, we've been very outspoken on that issue. And I think the idea was, and this is why Karp is a genius, which is annoying to say in public, is that like you can both be successful and not cave to be what is politically correct or viewed as corporate, accepted corporate blah blah. And so we've never hit who we are. For a while, we were not welcome many places. And also, the rebels did win because we didn't do all of the things that everyone else did. We only were associated with Ferrari, which is a very normal corporate thing to sponsor a team because we work with them, right? And so that's, we don't sponsor anything else. We don't have advertisements. We do with Ferrari, sometimes, but I think, the S&P was validating more so because the number of people, I've been at Palantir for 11 years, as of yesterday. And so the number of people who, even friends or whatever, who first thought that we were toxic and, CIA backed, and then it was, oh, it's not a real company, it's AI, it's vaporware, it's this, it's that. It's just, there was constantly something. And a lot of that was because, one, I think, we never kind of played by the rules, especially like our leadership at the time. And two, we kind of just always said the same thing. We have the best products in the world. We hire the best people in the world. And like, this is what we're going to do. And I think there's a lot of people who didn't want that to happen. And so when something as establishment and respected and vetted as the S&P takes us into it, that's a huge deal. And not as much for the financial reasons as you might think. It's more so because it just validates that, the philosophy of doing what we believe in and following that. And, a lot of times people told us the things we were doing were crazy, incorrect. We couldn't do it. Other companies trying to take us down, various, vapor copies. And we just kind of focused on what we knew to be true. We build the best products. We believe in what we believe in. We don't think it's, incorrect or politically incorrect to say that we believe in the West and its allies. And we march forward. And so like a lot of people, no one expected us internally to go public. That was not a thing. So going public and that doing well, and then getting to the S&P 500 in that short period of a time, it's a very different place for employees. Like, no, this is, every day is kind of a surprise. What's next? There's still a huge amount of ground to cover. People still don't understand, people still don't understand a lot of their technical problems they have. I have a huge number of calls every week with people still saying like, oh, but we're going to build it ourselves. And we really think it's like, no, don't build it yourself. Don't waste hundreds of millions of dollars on something that's commoditized. And it's what we do is really hard and is really technically challenging, and no one does it as well as we do. And no one's even pretending to at the moment. So, we have a lot of ground to cover. And I think that's the most exciting part, is that like from where you sit, it's your question is what's next. And for where we sit, we have a daunting challenge ahead, because we want to make sure that, Western institutions are strong and like, both private and public. And we think that we can help do that. And we want to expand that. And the West is a very big place.